professor of government at San Jacinto College. He also serves as adjunct faculty member at both Angelina College and Southern New Hampshire University. He is also pursuing his PhD in history from Liberty University. So please welcome my brother, Jeremy Pedigo.
Good afternoon. On behalf of San Jacinto College, a 2021 Aspen Institute Top 5 Community College in the United States, I want to thank Joseph and the Livingston Lions Club for the opportunity to speak today about the 2022 national election. Please note today's presentation doesn't support a particular ideology, but instead is based on established theories, patterns, and data obtained from various sources. So today's discussion, again, we're going to look at patterns. Part of it's political science, some of it's history. We're going to address three key questions. Number one, why does the President's Party historically lose U.S. House seats in the midterm election? We will assess two elections that skewed from this particular trend. Number two, which party will likely control Congress after the election and why? Number three, what must happen for President Biden and Democrats to regain support between now and November? First of all, why does the President's Party typically lose seats in the midterm election? So here's some factual information. Out of the past 19 midterm elections dating back to 1946, the President's Party has only gained seats in two elections. And that was in 1998 when Bill Clinton was president, and 2002 when George W. Bush was president. Now, with those two gains, the gains are also very nominal. So in 1998, the Democrats only gained 5 seats. In 2002, the Republicans only gained 8 seats. So even though the President's Party gained seats in those elections, it was actually a small amount. With Joe Biden's approval rating lagging, Republicans have a reasonable opportunity to gain control of the Senate and more likely in the House. And we'll kind of explain those reasons and look at the factors. We'll look at polling information. Okay, so what made Clinton's and Bush's situations different? In 1998, Bill Clinton had high approval ratings leading up to the election, despite being embroiled in the House impeachment. Most Americans opposed the impeachment. In fact, 2/3 did. 2/3 of the American people towards the end of 1998 felt like the scandal of Monica Lewinsky was actually a private matter. And so, also, the economy was doing really good during the Clinton administration. Social welfare programs. 1996, they passed a welfare reform bill. New data had come out showing that welfare rolls were going down. As far as George W. Bush, you got to look at 2002, the election, a little after year after 9/11. We're kind of in the early stages of the war in Afghanistan. There's a lot of support between Republicans and Democrats rallying around the American flag. And so again, it brought a lot of attention and support for George W. Bush and the Republicans. So looking at this historically, why does the President's Party lose seats in midterm elections? And political scientists have studied this trend for many years. And so there's really key 4 theories to that. Number one, one's called the turnout centric. Okay. According to this theory, there's lower stakes for the President's Party to vote since they know he will be on the ballot. I say he, well, let's say he or she. There will be a female president at some point. After the conclusion of the election. So this idea is that let's look at the 2020 election. Those Democrats who voted for President Biden, again, they're looking at this and thinking, well, I voted in 2020 because I want to make sure that he was president. And now they know that no matter what happens at their 2022 election, they know in their mind that he's still going to be president. So again, they're not as energized to vote for him for that reason. Some of the supporters in 2020 also now oppose some of his policies. And the other key is that the opposition party, so the Republican Party now, the party out of power always feels reinvigorated. There's a lot of energy, and so again, the Republicans form more energized at this point. The second theory is called the persuasion-centric. So this is a tendency of the public to disapprove the president's policies after 2 years. In my classes, we call this the honeymoon effect. And no, don't worry, it's not going to happen. The honeymoon effect. But again, we see this when I talk about my students in my federal government and Texas government classes. Again, it's like going out and buying a brand new car, right? It's like getting a new job. You get a new job, you come home from work the first day, your parents or your spouse today, how's your day? I love it. I love my coworkers, I love what I do. Then let's say you come home 6 months later asking you, how's your job going? I hate my job. I don't like my coworkers. I'm doing 90% of the work, and so it works the same way with politics, is that everything's all new and fresh in the beginning, right? But over time, it starts changing the public opinion. So this typically happens really with any new incoming president. So again, but here's the deal. By the start of the next presidential election, public support moves back to the president's party. And so they also call this a thermostatic model. So typically what happens is, so right now, the approval ratings for President Biden are low. Okay? And they'll probably stay that way until November, unless a few things change, which I'll discuss. But at this time, a year from now, in 2023, his approval ratings will probably be higher, because what happens is those who didn't vote Democratic side in 2022, by now they're thinking, okay, the 2022 election is over, we have to focus on 2024. So they feel a little more energized. So again, it's like a thermostat. It goes up, Biden's the new president, there's a high, it goes down now, midterm election, and it's going to go back up next year. The third theory is called the withdrawn coattails argument. This theory argues that during a presidential election year, if y'all don't know what the coattail effect is, the president who wins the election, they carry the coattails with them on their political party. So if you look at 2020, now it didn't really happen so much in the Senate though. The initial polls showed that the Democrats would have control of the Senate. There was a surprise, there was actually a tie in the Senate. But typically, if you look at it, whoever the new president is, if they're a Democrat, they're going to bring in a lot more Democrat members to Congress. Again, we're going to focus more on the House, because House members serve a 2-year term. They're all up for re-election every 2 years. Senators, a 6-year term. They're only up for re-election. About 1/3 of their seats are up every 2 years. But the argument of this is that typically that party gains a lot of seats because of the benefit of the new president. That in a normal situation, our country is really split between Republicans and Democrats. That basically it's inflated. It inflates it. And so by this time, it's going back to normal. So the fourth theory is called the ideological balancing theory. So this argues, this is the influence of the moderates. So the moderate voters, the independent voters, they're kind of sitting back and looking at this thinking, you know what? We got the Democrats, we got the Republicans, they're going after each other. And they're sitting there thinking, what do we do? They decide, you know what? We're kind of like the old third or minor parties. We're gonna side with the minority party. So we're going to side with the Republicans now, and they're going to tend to vote for them as kind of the party. So they're kind of giving support indirectly, and there are some statistics to back that up. Okay, so which party will control Congress? So currently, the U.S. Senate is currently split between 50 to 50. The Democrats do have an advantage because if they vote along party lines, then the vice president is going to break the tie vote. So the vice president is Kamala Harris. She's a Democrat. She serves under President Biden, so she's going to vote what Biden wants, which is typically Democrat. So there are some key races, though. So Republicans are targeting 4 races. One of them is in Arizona, Mark Kelly, the former astronaut. Georgia, Ralph Warnock. Nevada with Catherine Cortez Masto. And New Hampshire with Maggie Hassan. So they're targeting those 4 Democrat senators. Conversely, the Democrats are looking at Pennsylvania. Pat Toomey, who's no longer running, he's retiring. That seat's open in Pennsylvania. Also, Wisconsin, even though Ron Johnson's running a 3rd term, the Democrats are showing they think they could possibly beat him. And also North Carolina. So Richard Burr, the sitting senator, he's retiring. And so that seat is open. North Carolina and Pennsylvania have typically been battleground states. So those are states that the different parties are looking at. But here's the deal. There have been a lot of articles written over the last couple of months that it's going to be a landslide victory for Republicans. But a lot of the research doesn't show that, particularly in the Senate. So again, when you look at the U.S. House, I would say there's about an 80% chance the Republicans are going to win the House. The Senate, I would say, is about 60%. Here's why. So in the Senate, there's 35 seats up for re-election out of 100. Okay, but 21 are already held by Republicans. So 21, so they already hold those seats. But there's 14. The other 14 seats are held by senators who represent states that Biden won. So in order for Republicans to gain, and I know 1 seat may seem like a lot, you're thinking, well, if they hold on to those 21 seats, Republicans win all those. All they have to do is win 1 out of 14. it's easier said than done because they have to win one of those Senate seats in a state that Biden won in the 2020 election. So, and that's assuming you hold on to the other seats. So I would say the prediction is that the Republicans probably will gain 1 or 2 seats. Again, now my prediction's off. Don't hold it against me. But again, I don't think it'll be a landslide. But I do think they'll probably gain 1 or 2 seats.
That's all we need. Yeah.
But you never know. So again, who will control as far as the House? Right now, the House has 221 Democrats, 209 Republicans. There are 5 vacancies. So again, all you need is 218 for a majority. And right now, it's, again, likely Republican. So you're looking at probably 80, 90%. And I'm going to kind of give you some statistics on that. Okay, so how does 2022 look for Democrats? And I'll say right now, it doesn't look that good. There's a couple main factors. Number one is the president's low approval rating. So historically, there's a couple barometers you look at that determine whether or not the president's party will gain or lose seats in the midterm election. One of those is the president's approval rating. So it is low, it's in the low 40s. So that doesn't look good. He's also lost support among young voters. A lot of the polling that's come out, those young voters who voted for the president in 2020, they're down now. Number 3 are the economic challenges, right? Inflation, high gas prices, and shortages in the supply chain. Those are some of the key issues that this new polling's coming out as far as the voters. What are the main issues on the election? There's also another poll called, so a recent NewsHour PBS poll, and this is typically more of a left-leaning poll. But it's even come out, they have what's called it's called the Generic Congressional Vote Poll. It shows for the first time in 8 years, more voters support Republicans at this juncture of the election. Also, the poll shows that 55% of Latinos oppose Democrats. That's key because in the 2020 election, 68% of Latinos voted Democrat. And the Latino vote's very tricky because it's not a guarantee. A lot of the new voters in Texas and across the United States are Latino voters. So they're not fully committed to one party or the other. Right now, they're kind of just testing the waters, trying to figure out which party's going to be best. And again, looking at those top issues, according to this poll, the top issues in the country are inflation, crime, and national security. And Republicans lead on those top issues. And also, those independent voters, you know, I talk about those moderate voters. Independent voters give Republicans a 3-to-1 advantage on handling inflation. But, okay, so how can Democrats regain momentum? Number one, obviously, is the economy, right? We know it's the economy. And if the economy improves as far as lower inflation and gas prices. Number 2 is stronger leadership shown by President Biden. A lot of the polls are coming out, Republicans, Democrats, saying they want more leadership from the White House. Number 3 is, hey, it's all about competition, right? It's also about who your candidate is. So there are concerns, Republicans, in the Senate races with some of their candidates, and in particular in the state of Missouri. So in Missouri, if you may recall, their former governor, Eric Greitens, he resigned in 2018. He had an affair with his hairstylist. He resigned, he tried to blackmail her. So, but anyways, there's 21 Republicans running, and it's an open seat that was Republican. Roy Blunt is the senator who has that seat now. He's retiring, so that's one of those Republican seats that the Republicans need to hold on to. There's concerns that, so Greitens entered the race. Even the Missouri GOP chair came out months ago and said, get out of the race. Even when he gets governor, he ruffled a lot of feathers with Republicans. They've asked him, get out of the race. They're concerned because if Greitens wins the Republican nomination for Senate in Missouri, there's a good chance they could lose our race. Well, that's my presentation. So anyways, I hope you learned a little more about the trends, what's going on in midterm elections, the different theories out there. Again, a lot can change between now and November. We see how politics, public opinion polls, a lot can change. So a lot of this is really based on looking at theories, historical data, and updated polling information. Again, polls can change. We know tracking polls, and polls are not exact science. Anything done with social sciences is not. It's human errors. Now, I do have a $25 gift card I want to give out. Whoever can answer this question. If you may recall, when I came a year and a half ago, I brought 3 smaller gift cards, but y'all didn't have a Starbucks in. Yeah. Okay, so this one, y'all should know this one. What state was Sam Houston and Stephen F. Austin born in? What state were they born in? Stephen F. Austin and Sam Houston? No.
Texas.
No. No.
Arkansas.
No.
New Jersey.
Yeah, she got it, Virginia. Yeah, they're both born in Virginia. Yeah.
Hey.
Now, Sam Houston did go, after his dad passed away, they did go to Tennessee.
I did not look it up. I just happened to like,
I should know.
I had my phone out. I got something right.
Do y'all have any questions, Q&A?
Yeah, y'all have any, yes.
I mean, I'm sure with this audience, I got plenty to fire at, so.
Well, I only know 2 words. Virginia, pick it up.
Oh, yeah, yes, sir.
You didn't mention illegal immigration. That's not a factor?
It is a factor, but it's not one of those 3 key issues. If you look at this poll, it doesn't mean it's not an important issue, but it's not one of the 3 big issues. Because typically in most elections, no matter what, if you run an election, typically voters are focused on a couple of issues, even though there's lots of issues. And even as a candidate run for office, you want to focus on a few issues. That's what people want. They want something fast, quick. They're focused on those couple of big issues.
So
Yes, sir.
given the recent revelations from the Supreme Court, the leaked documents, how do you feel like that'll affect your forecast?
I think it will change it some. I'm really curious to see what the new polling comes out. There's a really good website called realclearpolitics.com. It has polling, it has liberal polling, conservative polling. It has a really good app. Realclearpolitics.com. Look at their polls. It has polls on every election race, but you follow those polls as tracking polls, and you can check how that public opinion changes. So I think it will have some type of impact. But a lot of it depends on how you ask the question. That's one of the things that, one of the big keys in social science is that how do you actually write the specific questions you write and type, because a lot of questions are biased. Polling agencies are funded by different outlets and stuff, whether it's conservative groups or liberal groups. You have to kind of do your research on to figure out which one, but you have to look at the way the questions are asked. Good question.
So well, there's a follow-up to that, all right? Where whenever you're studying the trends like that, do you anticipate like the same block of voters, or can a large issue like that activate a new segment of the populace to turn out to the polls? Right, does that question make sense?
Yeah, you're talking about which groups is it? Yeah, and we definitely look at that.
Not particularly that, but say something else happens, you know, like the war in Ukraine. Could something like that activate a new segment of the population, right, to come out and vote whenever traditionally they wouldn't have?
Certainly, it certainly can. But one of the things we like to look at are really the demographics. We like to look at things like age, gender, race, and ethnicity. Those are really the key things. Income makes a big difference too, because whenever someone participates in a random poll, that they're asked those questions. Things like, what is your race, what is your gender, and all that's kind of put together, because people vote differently. If you look at women and men, they don't look at the issues the same. It's called the gender gap. If you do polling, if you look at the big issues that are important to women, historically it's things like abortion, healthcare, child care, education, civil rights. But you ask men, it's the economy, it's the military, and it's the Second Amendment. Historically, it's a thing, and again, men and women don't all necessarily think the same. And but it also comes down to things like race, religion. But yeah, that does impact it. The military dealing with the war in Ukraine. Good question. Yes, sir.
Historically, what percentage of voters vote that are registered in any election?
Well, it depends on which election. So if you're looking at the presidential election, anywhere from about high 50s to 60%.
All right.
Texas election's a lot lower. And the runoff election coming up, the primary election in Texas, the primary runoff, you're looking at about 5%.
How do they justify all these states and the counties that have over 100% of their registered vote?
I'm not familiar with those counties, but if you could present me those counties, I
And
guess.
another example is Pennsylvania. They sent out 1.5 million mail-in votes. They got 2,500,000 back.
You had to ask Pennsylvania.
How's that happen?
I don't really know. I'm glad that didn't happen in Texas, though. I don't.
Oh, yeah.
I really can't speak for Pennsylvania.
That's a Tucker Carlson.
So how is the voter problem?
Yes.
Do you think right in the last, for example, like the Democrats are saving some issues? For example, immigration, or especially the gas prices. Do you think they're saving, say, 6 months from now, they'll all of a sudden turn Texas loose on the oil?
Yeah, so his question is, when, for example, when the parties themselves, maybe they know there's something they have to do, but they won't do it. Yeah, that happens in all cases, really. But there's things that, depending on the circumstance, you talk about gas, maybe the things that the Democrats know. I'll just use Democrats, for example. We could think of a Republican example, but things that maybe they know would be better. But the thing about it is that we talked about this in class today. So to voters ourselves, this gets into voter behavior.
Hey, table.
We base things on what's called the rationality thing. Like us as voters, we can sit around a table and say, well, this is what this article says, this is what this data says, and it may seem like common sense to do it. But they have external sources. They have lobbyists they have to deal with. They're part of political parties, political pressure. When you're in Congress, the Texas legislature, you've got to work together as a team. And if you go against your party, we've seen what's happened in the Senate with Senators Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. They made decisions on their own, but they understand the consequences that their party's not going to be happy with them. So each person has to determine that. But yet, there's definitely things they know in their right mind. They research it. Their research shows that this is a logical way to do it. But because you have all these external forces, you're not going to do it. Because it's the system itself. Good question.
Okay, another question I have, what is your
Have you seen
feeling
the
on?
documentary 2,000 Mules yet?
No,
Familiar with it?
no.
What is your thinking on term limits?
As a professor, I don't give my opinions on things. So I see the pros and cons. I actually do an assignment of online classes where they have to do a term limit. They have to present their views on term limits. Do they support term limits? Do they oppose term limits? I see the benefits of both. If you have term limits, you're getting new opportunities. Again, money is a lot of power. The longer you're in office, you're able to build up contacts. The research shows you're able to raise more money, and money plays a close, direct correlation to incumbency. But on the other hand, experience does matter. And part of the system, serving in Congress, even local government, city council, those who served before, many of y'all here, that experience does matter. Moving up, the culture in Congress, the state legislature across the country is that seniority matters. I interned many years ago for Jim Turner, the former U.S. House member here. He was a freshman member. And you saw that because when I showed up at his office, it was a very small office. He was a new member. A couple years later, I went to tour the U.S. Capitol again. I was in D.C. Suddenly, he's in a big office. I'm like, I should have been turned out. But seniority matters. So again, I think it's one of those things that sometimes you have to be careful. Like, yes, fresh faces is good, but we don't want to just dismiss experience. We all have experience in something, right? Work, some type of interest, some type of hobby. And so, again, so to answer your question, I understand both views.
Okay.
Yes, a question back there.
Yeah, in the beginning, you indicated that there's been 2 times when a sitting president gained votes in Congress election.
That's correct.
Okay. Does that mean that the gained votes gain control? Or is it just a population, just they just got more votes, control didn't change? And then how many times, or has ever, sitting presidents, well, it doesn't matter about the sitting president, how many times has a party gained votes in Congress in an election, an off election year, and didn't get control?
I'd have to look at each election individually, so it really depends on the election. But there was in the 1998 or 2002 election, it was one of those 2 elections was the least amount of turnover they ever had. I think 395 of the 435 members, actually incumbents, actually stayed in office. It was the lowest ever in a midterm election, or really any election, congressional election, where there wasn't high turnover. But if you look at 1998, it was actually in 98 when it happened, but 98, again, things were kind of normal. Outside the impeachment thing involving Bill Clinton, there wasn't much going on. If you remember back in the 90s, we weren't really involved in a war, and the economy was doing well for the most part, and we had a budget surplus for the first time in many decades. So there wasn't a lot. So for people to sit back and think, you know what, even some conservative voters, moderate conservatives, are like, you know what, we don't really need to change in that aspect.
In 98, 2002, did control of Congress change with those added seats for the president's side? That makes sense, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, your question is, did they already have control at that
Yes,
time?
did they have control or did they gain it with those members?
And that's a good question. And hold on 1 second. 98. I know the Republicans kept control in 1998. They actually only had control by two votes. But Newt Gingrich actually resigned. That was Newt Gingrich's last term because he was I forgot who the House Majority Leader is at the time, was pushing him out. They were disappointed. They thought the Republicans would do a lot better. Of course, he got in 1994. You know, the contract with America and pushing that. But yeah, the Republicans are actually surprised that they did not gain seats. And even though they retained a two-person majority, the fact is, since they only had a slim majority, Gingrich was gone. That's when he finished his term. Yes, Gary.
Gary, which president do you admire the most? Historical president.
I would say George Washington. Yeah, George Washington. Yeah.
He's number one.
I mean, to me, I think because the history, reading about Washington, how he established the presidency, so many of the precedents that have been established with the president, he was very conscious of that. Everything he did, he was very careful, knowing that he was doing things for future presidents. So I'd say definitely George Washington.
Is that it?